It all started about 6 months ago when Ben, my husband, and I hit a rough patch. It wasn't something either of us openly acknowledged, but the signs were there. The long silences. The small things we used to laugh about now felt like they had no punch. The kisses were a little less frequent. The conversations a little more strained. You know when you're in a relationship and things are fine on the surface, but underneath, there's this quiet, creeping distance. That's where we were. But I didn't know how to fix it. Ben didn't know how to fix it either. We both just pretended it wasn't happening, that it wasn't growing between us like a weed we refused to pull. And honestly, I didn't even know if I wanted to fix it. I wasn't sure what it was anymore. One night, Ben came home from work looking a little too eager. I could tell he had something on his mind. He tossed a flyer on the kitchen table. "So, I think we should check this out this weekend," he said a little too casually. He was trying to act normal, but the excitement in his voice was hard to miss. I stared at the flyer. It wasn't like the flyers we usually got. No pizza discounts or movie premieres here. This one was different. Swinger party. I couldn't even bring myself to say it out loud. I felt like I was reading the wrong page in a book I hadn't signed up for. Swinger party. That felt like something out of a TV show. Something that wasn't real. I looked up at him, trying to gauge if he was joking. But no, he was serious. His eyes were wide, almost pleading. There was no trace of humor, just that hopeful look. I knew what he was waiting for. My approval. I don't know why, but I felt myself hesitating. "You want us to go to that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ben shrugged a little too easily. "It's just a party. No big deal. Just fun, you know? Meeting new people. Just to see what it's like." I didn't know what to say to that. My stomach was doing flips, but I didn't want to shut him down outright. Instead I said, "I don't know, Ben. I'm not sure that's really what we need right now." He looked at me, his face softening. "It could be good for us, you know? A little excitement. A little change of pace." I hated the idea, but something inside me sparked. Not in the way you'd expect, but more like curiosity. Was this what we needed to feel something again? Was this the missing piece? I didn't know. So I told him I needed time to think about it. The next few days were odd. Ben kept bringing it up casually, like he wasn't really expecting a firm answer. But there was this energy in the air, something unsettled between us. The more he mentioned it, the more I started wondering if this party was just about fun or if there was something deeper he wasn't saying. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a random suggestion. Felt planned, like he was testing something. Testing me. By the time the weekend rolled around, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was I really going to say yes? Was I really going to walk into a room full of strangers and throw everything I knew about us into a blender? Maybe this was his way of breaking out of the routine we'd fallen into, but maybe, just maybe, it was something else. Something bigger. Something that neither of us were ready to face yet. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I felt like I was about to find out. I kept telling myself I wasn't going to go, but when Saturday night came, I found myself staring at my reflection in the mirror, wearing a dress I'd never thought I'd wear, holding my breath. I wasn't even sure what I was doing, but the pull of the unknown was stronger than my reservations. I was nervous, terrified, honestly. But Ben, he was different. The excitement in his eyes was palpable, as if he was looking at me for the first time again. And I couldn't help but wonder if that was enough to make everything else feel okay. We drove to the address, and I felt my pulse quicken with every turn. It was a neighborhood I hadn't been to before. Quiet, upscale, the kind of place that didn't scream swinger party, but whispered it instead. The house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, beautifully maintained, the lights dim enough to make it look inviting but mysterious. Ben turned to me, a grin playing on his lips. "You ready?" I wasn't, not by a long shot. But I nodded anyway. "Yeah, I'm ready." And then we walked in. The house was beautiful, though a little too perfect. The soft hum of music filled the air, but it didn't quite mask the tension that hung in the room. People were chatting, laughing, holding glasses of wine, but there was something about the way they looked at us, like we didn't belong here, like we were the new kids in an unfamiliar world. I could feel Ben's hand tighten around mine as we made our way through the crowd. I kept telling myself, just one drink, just one conversation, and then we'll leave. But by the time I had finished that one drink, I was already questioning if we could walk away at all. I'll be honest, walking into that house felt like stepping onto another planet. Everything was normal, and yet nothing was normal at all. The place was beautiful, decorated in warm lighting and expensive furniture, but there was something in the air that made my stomach tighten. Ben was relaxed, maybe a little too relaxed. He held my hand as we walked inside, guiding me through the living room, past couples lounging on plush couches, laughing over half-filled glasses of wine. Everyone looked at ease, like they belonged here. And then there was me, standing stiff as a board, trying to remind myself how to breathe. "It's fine," Ben whispered, sensing my nerves. "Let's just have a drink and see what it's all about." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. We made our way to the bar set up in the corner, and I let Ben order me something, my hands gripping the stem of the glass like it was my only lifeline. That's when we met them. A couple, probably in their late 30s, effortlessly attractive in that way that made you wonder if they had some kind of secret to looking that good. The woman, Elena, had piercing blue eyes and an easy smile, while her husband, James, carried himself with a kind of confidence that made you feel like he already knew how the night was going to unfold. Elena leaned in slightly, her gaze flickering between Ben and me. "First time?" she asked, her voice smooth, knowing. I forced a small laugh. "Is it that obvious?" James grinned. "Little. But don't worry, everyone here was new once." I could feel Ben shift beside me, his body language open, interested. He was engaged in the conversation, asking them about how these gatherings worked, how often they happened. He was curious, too curious, and the way Elena looked at him, it made something in my chest tighten. They talked like they had seen 100 versions of us before, a couple testing the waters, one partner hesitant, the other excited. It was like they already knew how this would play out. Ben, of course, was soaking it all in. I could tell by the way he was leaning in, listening carefully, drinking faster than he normally did. And then Elena said something that made my stomach twist. "The most important thing," she said, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her glass, "is trust." I glanced at Ben, searching for his reaction. He just nodded, smiling. But I felt something shift between us. A tiny crack forming in a place I hadn't even realized was fragile. A few more people joined us, all of them friendly, charming, making it seem like this was just another social event, like we were at a dinner party where the main course was something unspoken. My drink was half finished when Ben turned to me with that excited gleam in his eye. "Wanna take a look around?" I should have said no, but instead I said sure. So we wandered. Through hallways lined with doors that were slightly ajar, through softly lit rooms where hushed voices carried through the air. I tried to ignore the feeling in my gut that told me I was walking straight into something I wasn't ready for. Ben, on the other hand, looked like he was exactly where he wanted to be. At some point, we ended up in a lounge area where a few people were gathered. It was cozy, with dim lighting and velvet couches, the kind of space that felt intimate without trying too hard. I sat down hesitantly, my hands folded in my lap, while Ben settled beside me, looking far too comfortable. Elena and James joined us again, along with a few others, their conversation flowing effortlessly. I wanted to be relaxed. I wanted to enjoy the moment, to let go of the tension in my shoulders. But then, out of nowhere, Ben laughed at something Elena said, and the way he looked at her, really looked at her, made something inside me snap. It wasn't jealousy. Not exactly. It was something worse. It was realization. Realization that maybe this wasn't just about having fun. Maybe this wasn't just a random idea he'd thought of to spice things up. Maybe Ben had been thinking about this for a long time. I tried to push the thought away, but it clung to me, suffocating. I excused myself, mumbling something about needing some fresh air. Ben barely noticed. He was too caught up in whatever conversation was happening. I stepped outside onto the balcony, my fingers gripping the railing, breathing in the cool night air. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the feelings I'd been avoiding all night. And that's when I heard it. Laughter. Soft, flirtatious. Coming from just beyond the balcony doors. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse through the glass. Sitting closer to Elena now, his hand resting on his knee, but too close to hers. Their faces were inches apart. His body angled toward hers in a way that told me everything I needed to know. I felt something in my stomach drop. This wasn't just a party. This wasn't just curiosity. This was a choice. And Ben had already made his. I should have turned around. I should have gone back inside, grabbed my drink, and pretended like nothing had happened. But instead I stood there, frozen, watching the scene unfolding through the glass like I was a bystander in my own life. The air around me felt thick, like something was changing and I wasn't sure I could keep up. Ben's hand was casually resting on Elena's arm now. Their conversation light but their body language telling a different story. There was a warmth between them that I hadn't seen in ages. I knew it wasn't just about the party anymore. This wasn't just curiosity. This was something else. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, the beat uncomfortably fast. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should confront him or if I should walk away. But before I could make up my mind, Elena's laughter drifted through the open door. "Isn't this fun?" she asked, her voice pitched just right to catch Ben's attention. I couldn't hear his response, but the way he leaned forward, the way he was looking at her, something shifted inside me. I couldn't place it exactly, but it was like a door slamming shut in my chest. I turned away from the balcony and went back inside. The warmth of the house hit me like a wave as I stepped through the door. But I felt cold. Cold in a way I couldn't explain. I found my seat again back at the bar. The bartender smiled at me, pouring a fresh glass of wine without saying a word. I didn't know if I wanted to drink it or throw it in his face. As I stared into my glass, I felt the weight of the night settle in. Ben had been pushing me toward this moment all along. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere inside he knew. He knew this would happen. I wasn't sure how much of it I could blame on him though. Maybe it was me. Maybe I had been avoiding the truth about what was happening between us. Maybe I had let things slide too far without noticing. Elena's right, you know. I turned sharply at the sound of the voice. It was James standing beside me, his smile warm but knowing. "Excuse me," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everyone here was new once. But the key," he said, his gaze lingering just a little too long, "is knowing what you want. And if you want to make things work, you have to be open. You have to let go." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and I could feel the edges of the room closing in around me. I didn't know how to respond. This wasn't what I expected. He wasn't being pushy, but there was an undertone to everything he said. An undertone that made me question whether I was really in control of anything at all anymore. I wanted to leave. I wanted to grab Ben and get out of here. Forget this entire night ever happened. But I didn't. I stayed there, staring at James, trying to understand why his words were sinking into me like they were. Before I could say anything, James smiled and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I turned back to the bar, my fingers gripping the glass so tightly that I could feel the coolness of it seep into my palm. The evening felt like it was unraveling slowly, one thread at a time. I didn't want to face Ben. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening inside me. I glanced over at him. He was still sitting with Elena, laughing, their faces inches apart now. I felt a strange, hollow ache settle in my chest. This wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was this emptiness that I couldn't shake. Was this really what I wanted? I stood up from my stool, my legs unsteady beneath me. I didn't look at Ben. Instead, I turned toward the door, stepping out into the cool night air. The quiet of the garden outside was a sharp contrast to the noise inside. I stood there for what felt like forever, taking deep breaths, trying to steady myself. My mind was racing, each thought spiraling into another. This wasn't what I expected. Not by a long shot. I heard footsteps behind me, and before I could turn around, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Ben. I didn't turn to face him. Couldn't. Not yet. Are you okay? He asked, his voice softer than it had been all night. But even with the softness, there was something in it that I couldn't quite place. I'm fine, I said quickly, too quickly. I didn't want to look at him, not now. He stepped closer, and I could hear the concern in his voice when he spoke again. You don't seem fine. You've been distant all night. Is this too much for you? I didn't know how to answer. Was it too much? Maybe. But there was more to it than that. I wasn't just uncomfortable. I was questioning everything. What had brought us to this point? Was this what we both wanted? I just need some air, I said, my voice cracking slightly. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Ben didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there beside me, as if waiting for me to say something else. But I couldn't. I didn't know how to put what was in my head into words. I glanced over at him. He was looking at me with that same hopeful expression, the one I'd seen when he'd first suggested this party, the one I was beginning to resent. Ben, I think we need to talk. His face softened. We can talk whenever you're ready. Just don't leave me here, okay? I nodded, but in that moment, I wasn't sure if I was talking to him or to myself. The night wasn't over, but I felt like it already was. The air outside was cooler than I expected, and it hit me like a breath of fresh air, washing away the tension that had been building inside the house. I stood there on the balcony for a long time, my hands gripping the railing, feeling like I was caught between two versions of myself. I could still hear the muffled voices from inside, the low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses. It all felt distant now. I was no longer a part of that world, at least not the way I had been before. I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. I didn't want to face him, not yet. Not when everything felt so raw and uncertain. Hey! His voice was softer than it had been all night, hesitant. I could feel the weight of his presence behind me, like he was waiting for me to say something. Anything. Ben, I said, finally turning to face him. His eyes were wide, searching, and for a moment, I felt the weight of everything between us. We need to talk. He didn't speak at first. He just nodded, stepping closer to me. There was no more excitement in his movements, no more of that carefree energy. Now he was unsure, and I could see the shift in him. He was realizing that things weren't going the way he'd imagined. I took a deep breath. I don't know what you thought was going to happen tonight, but this isn't what I want. The words hit the air like a sharp blow. Ben's face fell. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable, he said. His voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe? I just thought. You thought what? I interrupted, my voice trembling slightly. That this would fix things between us. That I'd just go along with it. His eyes softened, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I married. The man who had always been open with me. The man I had once trusted completely. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. I never meant for you to feel left out. I thought maybe it could be fun for both of us, he said. His voice barely above a whisper. But now I see. I cut him off again, unable to hold back the anger that bubbled to the surface. You didn't see me at all, Ben. You didn't see how I felt. You didn't see me. His eyes flashed with something that looked like guilt, but it was too late. The cracks between us were too wide now, and no amount of regret could close them. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought you'd be open to it. I wanted us to experience something new. To have something to connect over again. I shook my head. No, Ben. You wanted your version of fun. You wanted your adventure. I was just a spectator. Ben's shoulders slumped, and for a second, I thought he was going to say something else. But he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, looking at me as though the words to explain everything had gotten stuck in his throat. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't angry, that I wasn't hurt. But I couldn't. 'Cause I was angry that he hadn't listened. angry that he'd chosen this path without ever thinking about what it would do to me. "I think we need some space," I said, my voice quiet but firm. His expression changed, the weight of my words sinking in. "Are you saying?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I don't know what I'm saying. But I need time. Time to think. Time to figure out if I even know who you are anymore." He didn't respond right away. He just stood there. His lips parted like he was about to say something, but then thought better of it. There was nothing more to say, really. Not tonight. I walked past him, heading for the door, the cool night air still swirling around me. Ben didn't follow. He didn't stop me. And for some strange reason that felt like the biggest betrayal of all. When I reached the door, I turned back once more. He was still standing there watching me. "I'll call you," I said, my voice softer now. But it wasn't a promise. It was just something I needed to say. And then I left. I didn't look back. Couldn't.